Well, we've been talking about living as strangers in this world, and that's not a new subject. We've heard it for how long? As long as we can remember that we're going to be different. And we come to verse 13, and I'm telling you, we when we were in the book of Acts, or no, the book of Romans, in Romans chapter 13, we spent several lessons on Sunday morning talking about submission. And those lessons were important to me, but even after all those lessons, I don't know exactly how to feel about how to do all this. And as we look at this right now, different ones will have different opinions about what we're doing, how we do it. So verse 13 says, "Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among men." Now, even that gets a little strong for me. Every authority instituted among men, whether to a king as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. And what I have said, I think, from the book of Romans is that if leaders are working for our good, then submission becomes relatively easy. It's not always easy. It's not always easy because I'm convinced that my parents at times are working for my good, and I did not like what they were saying. And I probably rebelled a bit against that, even though they were working for my good. And I'm pretty sure that there are other situations in life when it may have been a school teacher or it may have been whomever. They were working for my good, and I didn't really want to submit to what they said. But the issue comes when I am around an authority who is not working for my good. In fact, they are working to maybe even harm me. And as Christians, we're called to submit. Now, in Russia right now, if I'm reading the articles correctly, the president of Russia, or whatever he's called, named Putin, is waging a war against Ukraine. A war he thought would last but a short period of time that's still ongoing. And so now he has had several people in Russia speak out against what's happening in that war. Have you read what's been happening to those people who speak out against it? They're jumping out of windows of tall buildings with a single bound. Only they don't do what those old shows that I used to watch on black and white with Superman do. They fell to the ground and died. And they've been dying in various ways. He's forcing submission, or trying to. And yet here we are tonight, and we are being called to live differently from this world, and we're supposed to submit. Do you think all the kings that were existing during the day this was written were good kings? Do you think some of them were guilty of slaughtering Christians in the sports arena with wild animals? And some were guilty of putting them on stakes and using them as human torches? I mean, what do we do with this thing of submission? And I think that there are different ways to look at it in different circumstances. Every circumstance is different. And probably in this room, if we kind of drill down and ask every person their opinion, you think we might find differences of opinion? And by the way, I may get in trouble with this. Do you realize that we can exist in unity and have differences of opinion? Do you realize we can do that? Those of you who are married know that is true. I mean, you can have differences of opinion and exist in unity. And I've been reading a book. It's kind of on church history. I think it's called Down at the Blue Hole. And I've been amazed at in the early 1800s, the differences of opinion in almost every religious group that ever existed, and how they had all kinds of differing opinions, and how that finally some people would come together, like a man named Barton Stone from a Baptist movement and a man named Campbell and Smith, both of them from the Presbyterian movement, and they would shake hands and say, we're going to just try to be Christians only, and we're going to not worry about the things that we differ on. We're going to concentrate on the main things, and how that worked so well for a while. And then really strong-minded and actually harsh people came along and tore it all to pieces. And it's interesting to me that how often today we are a product of all that happened back then. And all that they originally were saying was, it's possible for us to differ on various things and still be in unity with each other. And I think it's a lesson to be learned. And this particular passage, I don't know how to do it. In one situation, I do it maybe one way, another, I do it another way, and you may do the same thing. How much submission do I really do when it gets to where I don't want to be and what I don't want to do? And in a local church, do you agree with everything that the elders say? Do you? I'm fairly certain that through your lifetime, you've not agreed with everything that they've said. I'm fairly certain you haven't agreed with everything the preacher has said or others have said. And yet, you work together and you continue, because this thing of unity and this thing of faith and this thing of loving people is bigger than my opinion on certain issues. And so he says, it's a rare place. I mean, not very often do you find this. It is God's what? Did you catch that? It is God's will. And have you ever spent time wondering what God's will is for you? If you hang around young people very long, young people are always asking this question, or frequently asking the question at least. What does God want me to do with my life? Does He want me to be a veterinarian, or does He want me to be working for the railroad, or does He want me to live here or live over there, or what is God's will? And you kind of smile and say, I'm not sure He cares a lot of times. The Bible doesn't say things like that, but it says it's God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish men. And it's right in conjunction with the idea of submission. Is that hard? Is that hard material? I don't think it.
If you watch the Facebook and stuff, and politically speaking, people say horrible, ugly things about both sides. And maybe it's talking about we need to be the kind of person that Christ expects us to be in deed and in word, and try to calm the waters rather than, maybe that's what that's talking about.
I think it's talking, I think it's in part, I think it's talking about we are supposed to be good citizens. We're supposed to be good citizens. But it's getting harder and harder in a very polarized world. And if you read very many articles, the world is more polarized right now than we've ever seen it. And yes, people say things harshly and meanly, and can almost do it anonymously on things like social media. And there's some social media now, is it called Snapchat, where you can put down what you think, and there's no way they can trace your name. And so you can have a young person get on the stage at a place like Oklahoma Christian, and someone's saying something to fellow students or whatever, and somebody starts Snapchatting out there, and they talk about the shape of the body, or they talk about the hair falling out, or they talk about, let's say, the ugliest, meanest things you can imagine, and there's no way to give repercussion, and it destroys those people they're talking about. Literally destroys them. And there's been more than one suicide that they've linked to that among young people. And we're supposed to be people of respect, and people of kindness, and people who are good citizens, and who at least try to do the right thing.
I think in a very crude way of putting it, it's almost like saying, don't get bent out of shape over things that, I don't know, they're not, important. I mean, yeah, there's times like here in America, you have to stand up sometimes about this is wrong, something's wrong. But for the most part, if you're walking around grumbling, they raised this or lowered the speed limit to 55. People grumbling, like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And also because it says, submit yourself for the Lord's sake. It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about you being an example of Christ in the world, which is, again, hard to do when your personal political views or you feel slighted or put upon. Your reaction is go, I'm ignore that, and I'm gonna lash out, I'm gonna riot, I'm gonna do whatever.
It's interesting. I was in a meeting this week, and a lady spoke up and said, I am too conservative for my own good, so I just got off all news. I don't watch anything because all it does is make me mad. And she said, I just don't want to act like I've been acting. So I haven't watched it in months or anything. And I thought, I can understand that. I can understand why she would think that. So again, watch the next verse, because the next verse is going to say you're free to decide in your life at this given moment in time that you might be in how you're going to conduct yourself, even in that respect of submission, because he says, live as free men, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. What in the world could that mean? Live as free men. Well, in the context of all religion prior to this, and all religion talked about in the Old Testament, it was all related to the Jewish law. And the Jewish law was extremely constraining. In almost everything you did, it was extremely constraining. And so that if we were under the Jewish law, we might not have been able to eat everything we ate tonight. Because you did eat some ham, and that was considered to be unclean. And so it was extremely confining set of laws. And in Christ, we've been set free. And you're not going to find dietary laws. You're not going to find this and that. And so many things are not plain. And he says, you live as free men. But you don't want to use your freedom as a mechanism to sin more. See, I could do that. I could say, it's none of your business. I'm free. There's no law governing me. I can act the way I want to act. You are free to make your own decisions. And one of the amazing, beautiful things is we are free to read this Bible for ourselves. And we are free to listen to a certain passage and say, I think this is how that applies to me. I think this moment in life is how I need to change. You're free, but you can use that as an excuse to not be obedient too. There aren't many, thou shalt do this and thou shalt not do that. They're not. It's more of a lifestyle you live like Christ lived once you become a member of the kingdom. And we're taught how to become a member of the kingdom. Once you get in the kingdom, you're in this land of freedom, only constrained by trying to live like Jesus lived. And the amazing thing is, did he live a life of submission? Was it always pleasant? No. I mean, how could anyone be so mistreated and be so silent? I mean, the last time somebody slapped you, how did you react? The last time someone spit in your face, how did you react? The last time someone called you ugly names, how did you react? I didn't like that list of things because I'm thinking about myself, and it didn't go that well. You know, my attitude wasn't quite that good. But we are born into a kingdom where we are constrained only primarily by living as Jesus lived. So the Sermon on the Mount is not a series of just rules that you follow. It's a series of principles by which you live. It's be careful what you let your eyes see. Be careful how you talk. Live an honest life. Live a life that's moral. Live a life where you treat people right. Even your enemies, you love them. Those are hard things, and yet that's what Jesus did. So, do you think if you live like this, you'd be a stranger in this world? You think you'd look really differently? And he says, do that for the Lord's sake. This is what God wants. He wants you to be really different in this world. But you may be stronger than I am. You may be at a different level in your life than I am. And so we're all going to react to this differently. I can't walk up and say, Don, now here's how you got to act in this situation. I can't bind that on Don because I don't know where he is and where we're different. Does that make sense?
But how does it fit in that verse 13 about leaders? Your corrupt leaders, no matter what side of the aisle they're on.
That aren't looking out for our own good.
I know. It's somehow we're supposed to try to submit to him.
I mean, that's where
At
like when Romans 13. I mean, again, this is something you would be contentious with things, but I mean, the way I read Romans 13 is there's no exception. Say like, well, unless they're being mean to you.
No.
Now I understand there's different outs you can go for that, but I mean, does that mean a Christian's supposed to walk around like it's a punching bag? I mean,
Look what Christ did with the money changers.
yeah, there's righteous anger.
Yeah, he didn't submit though. He did by going on the cross, but
Yeah.
he didn't allow it to continue.
But, I mean, I just think it's really hard. I mean, but Burke is right. In these passages, Romans 13, it's almost the exact same wording in this 1 Peter 2 passage. It just tells us that's what God wants us to do. And I'm just telling you, I don't know how to do it. And you think your thought will be different than my thought on it. And we're free to figure that out for ourselves.
Yeah. I don't remember where it's at. The very reason that we live in this world, that we're not of the world.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to live our lives by.
Yeah. That's what Paul says. We're in this world, but we're not of this world. But again,
Our time versus God's time, too.
mhm.
I just think you have to remember that in all things that God is in control.
Yeah, that's true. And we have to.
It's like when you see something like something that's a great injustice. Just say, for example, you see a politician that's so obviously corrupt. I mean, it's hard to, no matter what kind of excuse you try to find, it's like this person is corrupt through and through. And when I get mad about it, I have to go. I was like, it's not mine. Like, I'm angry about it right now, or I'm irritated by it, but I hope they enjoy it. At some point, it's the Lord's to avenge, not mine.
Yeah, and that's what the Sermon on the Mount teaches. And
Jeremiah said, "Justice is mine, saith the Lord.
Mhm.
Vengeance belongs to me."
and God will take care of it. So, yeah. Pat?
We're pretty much in submission when we pay our taxes, submission to the government.
Yeah.
Knowing that a lot of it is
Right.
going for things we wouldn't think about doing or paying for.
That's true. But if you boil it down, even down to a local congregation, I don't know how many times I've seen people not like what the elders do, and they get around it. They won't submit, and so they discredit the elders. They're not qualified, or they're not, this or that. And I think it's saying, be careful about doing that. Just be careful. Be careful about how you deal. I'm telling you, I'm pretty conservative on a lot of things, and there are a lot of things going on right now in this nation's capital I don't like, but it's actually on both sides of the aisle right now. I'm pretty disgusted with. But I'm telling you, if you want to push my button, take this guy who killed the little 4-year-old girl and buried her in a fence row, and you're going to have a tough time if he were standing out there for me not getting a gang of people and go deal with that guy. I would have a tough time, but I know I'm not supposed to. There's some things that, so. Anyway, I'm going too long, I know that, but you see how difficult it is, how many different opinions there are, but you have to wrestle with it in your own life.